All right, welcome back. Coming to you live in hour number 3 from the Second Call Defense, defending you after you defend yourself studio. This is Lock and Load. Joined again for the first time in a while because he's out there always on the run and doing things. The owner of the nicest 10 millimeter in the United States. We're joined again by Dr. John Edeen of the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. Good evening, Dr. John.
Hey, how's everybody doing today? Just give greetings to the guys in the chat room.
Which one?
All of them.
Oh, okay.
All my buddies.
All your buddies. Yeah, you dropped out because I guess you didn't want to have your computer turned up too loud, right?
Well, not only that, but that way I can access some information, just like you.
Gotcha. Now, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
I was... I've been to a doctor's office, and I've been to a doctor's office where he was asking me a lot of questions. And while I was sitting there, him asking me a bunch of questions about a lot of things, I was having heart attacks. And then the very next week, I had the big heart attack, and they weren't really paying attention to me. Why do doctors need to ask questions about anything unless they're trying to find out the malady that you're coming to them for?
Well, I mean, you want to do what's called a history of present illness, but then you also need a past medical history because there are risk factors involved. Things like smoking history and things like that are pertinent. With this decision is not pertinent. This is a political agenda being, forced on the patient population by medical organizations that have an anti-Second Amendment agenda.
So in Florida now, just exactly, is this part of Obamacare? Is this why they want to do this, or?
No, this is pre-existing all that stuff. This has been going on for 20 years. This is the AMA and American Medical Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, American College of Surgeons, academics decided, we're of the progressive bent. We want to push the agenda of disarmament so that it facilitates the takeover of the country by the progressive agenda. And, because the freedom-loving people, if they're disarmed, they can't resist. So that's why they want to get rid of the Second Amendment protections.
So what would you think I don't know which doctor. I saw the article. I saw what David Codry was referencing, and I saw the one that got written by the DRGO. But is this in danger of becoming something nationwide, or is this just something that just should be beaten at every turn?
I think it has to be addressed at the state level because these are all state laws. There's no federal law right now. And I think that this case will probably go, hopefully get sent up to the Supreme Court once we get a few more justices appointed. But this is in fact, there's a bill in Texas which is similar to this that's been introduced. So it's states state legislatures are looking at this very closely because we want to protect the patients from this intrusive, politically based agenda. Look at the average person who may not be like you or me, where we keep up on the politics and we know what's going on. So a poor working person shows up, that the doctor in the white coat shows up in the office and says, do you own guns? They're there for something else. They're there with their child, and they're intimidated by this doctor, and they feel that they have to answer the question. You and I both know, not only do we not have to answer the question, but, we have the right to fire the doctor who does this kind of stuff. But people who are in maybe not quite as financially independent status may have to use that doctor, and they don't understand that they can actually not only say no to the question, but also that if they insist that they can actually report that doctor to the state medical society or the state, medical board actually, for something called a boundary violation. This is using the physician-patient relationship to push a political agenda. That's not what the physician-patient relationship is about. It's about providing health care for the betterment of the patient, not for pushing a political agenda by the physician.
I was just thinking of something that had happened around here when you were telling me that. I'll have to have a talk with you about that offline. What do you think?
Okay.
As we go forward, I mean, this has been allowed to sit. There's been a lot of things that have been allowed to sit. This is really sort of indicative of the price. I mean, presidents and administrations get to appoint judges, don't they? And we've got judges in the Fourth Circuit, and we've got judges in Florida who are making these calls and everything. That, I mean, just it's pretty simple. It's not that much of an interpretation or leap to figure out what they're supposed to do. They just don't do it.
Right. I mean, if you look at the 11th Circuit, 5 of the justices were appointed by Obama and 3 by Clinton. Okay, so there's 8 out of, 14 or 15, right?
That's just a big sandwich.
More than half are Clinton appointees or Obama appointees. And then there's 1 by Ford, 1 by George H.W. Bush, and 1 by George W. Bush. So there's certainly a majority that have been appointed by Democrats. And so that because of their political agenda, they're going to have activist judges. I mean, if you look at what the lawyer that the DRGO and Second Amendment Foundation and Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, who wrote an amicus brief for this case, he basically said they didn't even look at our brief because they didn't address all the points that we put in our brief. They just ignored it. They ignore facts and just put in what they want to put in. They don't have to, make an argument based on precedent or anything like that. Just like, the Fourth Circuit Court, forget Heller, weapons in common use, blah, 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 blah. They just said, oh, no, well, it's an assault weapon. We can't have that. And it's pushing their political agenda. Right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. How can people
They're
find
thumbing their nose at the Supreme Court? So
yeah.
you know that the Supremes are going to look at this, at least the ones who voted, for Heller, they're going to look at this and go, okay, we're going to get our crack at you later. And when we get our crack at you, we're going to smack you down. So now we're looking at all these, circuits that have been turned to the left. You're looking at the 11th, you're looking at the 4th. Of course, the 9th has always been to the left. But, because Obama had 8 years to appoint all these circuit judges.
Let me get you to hold right there. We're coming up on the break. We'll be right back. Dr. John Edeen. All right, welcome back. Coming to you live from the Second Call Defense, defending you after you defend yourself studio. This is Lock and Load. This portion of the show is brought to you by Froglube. Talking about doctors. When you go to see a doctor that might ask you about guns and such when you go to see him, with Dr. John Edeen for the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. Now, on the website, on DRGO, Dr. John, they say that doctors receive absolutely no training about firearm safety, mechanics, or tactics in medical school or residency. So they're basically not even really qualified, and they probably don't know what they're even asking me, do they?
That's absolutely true. Even my own experience, I did a military residency program, and we did not talk about firearm safety. At one point in time when I was doing my, active service, I went to the range and we had to qualify shooting a 1911. But even then, we really didn't get much of a safety lecture. I mean, it was kind of bizarre. They just said, okay, here's your gun, shoot at the target, and that was it. So, yes, in answer to your question, the vast majority of physicians have zero training in firearm safety, firearms handling, firearm storage. Their only training is what they get from their the AMA or the American Academy of Pediatrics with position statements and, telling them, this is what you should do. And what they're telling people to do is either A, separate your ammunition from your firearm and lock them up separately, or B, get rid of your firearms altogether. Now, that works really good to prevent accidental firearms discharge and, deaths of children, and this is what they're saying they're trying to prevent. However, it doesn't work so well when somebody kicks in your door at 2 o'clock in the morning. What then? What do you do when your firearm is disabled and you have 5 seconds to react? So then we ask, we have to ask the physicians. So what happens if I follow your advice and I am harmed by your advice? Does your insurance company know that you are practicing outside of your scope of medical practice and that, you are not covered for this? And so now you assume liability all by itself. And this brings me to the David Codria's form that he has made up. He did this up with the late Joe Horn, who was a retired LA Sheriff's deputy, and it's called the Firearm Safety Counseling and Representation Physician Qualification and Liability Form. And this is a stroke of genius. And David told me about this in 2014 at the Chicago Gun Rights Policy Conference. And I finally am seeing it in print, and it's just awesome. Because basically what he does is he has the physician attest to either the fact that, yes, I have gone over all the literature involved in, firearm safety and the safe usage of firearms and defensive firearms use, as well as if I'm going to counsel you for that, I have to counsel you for this myriad list of other safety things in the home. Or the best part is, or I am knowingly engaging in home firearm safety counseling without certification, license, or formal training in risk management, and that I have not reviewed applicable scientific literature pertaining to defensive gun use and beneficial results of private firearms ownership. So, really what you're doing is you're putting these people up against the wall saying, okay, either I've studied this and I'm certified, or I haven't, and I'm practicing outside of the scope. And is my insurance company going to cover you for that? Heck no. And so this really puts the physicians on notice. And so, you can get it in the article that David Codria wrote, and it's in AmmoLand, and you can print that thing up. And I suggest that you bring one of those when you go to your doctor's visit and just put that on the desk and say, doctor, will you sign this? and see what happens. I think that will shut them up faster than anything else.
See, I'm not afraid to here, let me pull my microphone back down to my face level again. I'm not afraid to question a physician. Not because I think I know more than them. It's just that, if I've got something in my lower back and they're messing with my shoulder, I think something might be wrong. So from time to time, I have bumped up against them. I've never been asked about guns, but I'm waiting. I'm waiting to see if that happens. And when they do, I'm simply going to go, listen, you know how to fix this issue, and I know how to handle those. So why don't you let me deal with my area of expertise, and I'm not going to mess with yours.
Right. And again, you're a unique individual because you are, schooled on these issues, but the average person probably isn't. And they're being cowed by the agenda of their healthcare providers. And a lot of people don't have the self-esteem or the education to stand up to their doctors. As physicians, we hold a unique place in society. We're, the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, and all this kind of stuff. Well, there's a lot of physicians out there who are running the political agenda at the detriment to their patients. And so, this is an ethical issue, and we talked about the ethical boundary violation, and this is a prime example. Here's another ethical boundary violation: having sexual relations with your patient. That's an ethical boundary violation. That's a sacrosanct relationship and shouldn't be used for the gain of either party. So these are the kind of things that we're looking at. when they're trying to push a political agenda at the expense of the patient relationship, that's not what we're looking for. This is why the Firearms Owner Protection Act was passed to begin with. There were also other examples where physicians refused to treat patients because of their firearms ownership.
That would be fine. I would love to walk out. Don't forget about the copay, brother.
Yeah, but what about if it's something emergent, or what if it's somebody who has a specific skill set that's rare and that you need? Then what do you do?
I guess.
You see.
Anyway, I tell you what.
What if it's your heart surgeon and you're dying?
We're coming up on the break. We're coming up on the break. You can find the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership at drgo.us. They are writing the stuff that nobody writes because they're up against a group of guys that, well, quite frankly, think they know more than we do. We'll be right back. Having a discussion with Dr. John Edeen of the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. I don't want to deviate too much because we have covered some of this stuff about docs with Glocks, but I mean, you've done some fascinating stuff about hospitals and being gun-free zones. That's sort of like your area of expertise. Would you like to address some of that, maybe? Have we still got Dr. John? Am I just talking
to
me? Now we got you.
Okay, good. So anyway, this whole this is why I'm here right now, actually, is this gun-free zone issue. I've been a concealed carrier in Texas since 2007, and every time I go into the hospital, I'm confronted with the famed 30-06 sign in Texas, which is you're not allowed to carry even though you've been vetted and fingerprinted and background checked in this building. So every time I went to the hospital, I'd have to disarm. And then I started thinking about, you see where these gun-free zones are the subjects of focused attacks. The school shootings, the theater shootings, all of which are in gun-free zones. And, every once in a while we'll have a, man with a weapon, security alert in the hospital. And, I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy. We're all sitting ducks here. There's no way the security team who is armed with tasers is going to be able to, stop an event where somebody decides he wants to kill a bunch of people in a hospital. By the time the police get there and the SWAT team and whoever else is going to arrive, they got to get to the place. It's over. These things are over in less than 5 minutes usually, and most of the time the police aren't even notified for 5 minutes by the time these things happen. So I started trying to get our county medical society to endorse getting rid of gun-free zones, and it was an utter failure because they're indoctrinated by the mindset. And then I met Tim Wheeler at Gun Rights Policy Conference, and he and I, have been working together ever since trying to get this sorted out. And I've written several articles about the immorality of gun-free zones because we know that there are places where evil people decide to do their deeds. And then also, in thinking about stuff, with the age of terrorism and ISIS and open borders and all this kind of stuff, we know that we've got cells inside the United States and that hospitals are soft targets and that we are going to see at some point in time here in the not too distant future attacks on places like schools and hospitals by terrorist cells. And we are totally unprepared to face those events. Hospitals do, terrorism drills and casualty drills, but they don't do drills where they are the casualty, where they are the target of the attack. And so this is going to, when this happens, it's a devastating thing. We can look back at the history of things that have happened in Russia back in the mid-'90s, where the Chechens attacked several hospitals in Russia, one of which caused the Russians to capitulate, and these guys all escaped. and they had took over 1,000 hostages. If that were to happen in the United States, what would our government do? This is very politically powerful.
I don't know what they would do because, I mean, hospitals are these very big affairs anymore. I mean, they're not like it would be like trying to take the Nairobi, Kenya, Westgate Mall back.
Right. In fact, when things happened in Russia, they were able to very easily repel Spetsnaz guys in armored personnel carriers trying to retake the building. So, because what they do is they take the building and then wire the entrances with explosives.
Right.
And they may even put the hostages on a different floor and wire the floor with explosives so that they collapse the building on top of everything. They don't mind dying. These guys are fanatics.
Yeah.
And so, it's got to be a very rapid response. And I can't think of a better response than having people inside the hospital who are armed and are trained. Because that's the only way you're going to disrupt their plans. In fact, if it's well known that these hospitals are armed and they have trained people in there, and that you cannot readily identify them because they are carrying concealed, they're not wearing a badge or a uniform, that is a deterrent. So that will, they may pick a different hospital. And for me, personally, I'd rather have it be somebody else's hospital than mine.
Right.
Because I don't want to see my colleagues and my patients being slaughtered by either some lunatic or by a gang of terrorists.
Do you think hospitals are a bigger risk for a active shooter or a terrorist attack?
I think as things stand right now, it's a terrorist attack. Active shooters are relatively small effect. They're usually localized to one small area in the hospital. And the number of people who are at risk are limited. If you have a terrorist attack with a cell of 20 people, you may have over 1,000 hostages in a hospital, and that's going to have a huge, devastating effect on both the psychology of the community, but also on the functionality of a hospital. If they start blowing up ERs and things like that, now you're taking the ability of a hospital to respond to trauma away. And if you're in a medium-sized city or a small town, that may be the only hospital or maybe one of two hospitals available. So now you've taken out half of the capability of healthcare in a community, and that's
right.
A significant effect.
We're coming up on the last break. You wrote recently a very good article on this topic. Where could they find this article? Where could people find that?
The Concealed Carry Magazine, the July issue, and you can also find a link to it at drgo.us if you want to find it there.
That's the easiest place to go, isn't it? That's where all the other good stuff's at, drgo.us. So.
It's all there. In fact, we have a link to all the articles on the Docs versus Glock. Law and the cases if you really want to read up on that, it's a very easy way to go find it. And that's in the article written by Dr. Young that came out on the 21st of February this year.
Right. When we get back, we're going to talk about what came out of this study with Purdue, which is very much indicative of what Dr. John Edeen is afraid of. You can find the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership at drgo.us. They appear quite frequently at ammoland.com. And from time to time, when I can track him down, Dr. John shows up here at Lock and Load, or at least in the chat room. So we'll be right back. This is Lock and Load.
The difference.
All right, last time on the firing line, coming to you live from the Second Call Defense, defending you after you defend yourself studio. This is Lock and Load. This portion of the show is brought to you by Froglube.
Tired of gun lubricants that create buildup? Well, so was I. That's why I switched to Froglube. Froglube was developed by Navy SEALs, and if it's good enough for the best, it's good enough for me. Froglube eliminates residue while improving accuracy. Froglube works in any condition. Shift to Froglube and feel the difference. Go to froglube.com and get yours now. That's froglube.com. It just works.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does indeed. Don't you know Larry Lasky, John?
Yeah, I met him at it was an event outside of Austin this summer.
Yeah.
And he had a booth there, and he and I and Rob Morse, of course, was there. We took pictures and sent them to you. Remember that?
Yes, I do. Yes, that's why I was trying to remember. So do you use Froglube now?
In fact, I lubed up my Glock 17 right before the show today. I had a red dot pistol course this weekend and ran that gun, so I had to finally break down and clean it. So
we'll have to
that's
talk.
what I did earlier today.
I need to take a red dot class. Talking to Dr. John Edeen of the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. Now, you said a very key phrase just a minute ago about how armed people could disrupt a terrorist attack, and that's really what it's all about, right? When the Parisian attack happened, and that music venue was attacked, and they were asking how did all of this happen and everything. Somebody looked at that and said, when somebody's in there without being disrupted, they're going to shoot everybody. Somebody's going to get shot every 20 seconds. I mean, that's particularly horrifying when you think about an armed little posse going into a place and locking the doors and locking themselves in, and they're just taking pot shots at people. So that means 3 people are dying a minute, and then just do the math, right?
Yeah, and during that attack, they had a lot more than just 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's why there was such a high casualty rate. Even if you look at the shooting in Orlando at the nightclub, if one person went after that guy from his blind side, they could have stopped this whole massacre. Or if one person had been armed, they could stop the massacre with one shot to the back of the head. But people are running away in different directions, and there's a fellow in New Jersey named Anthony Calandro, and he coined the term "rush the nut." And I think that we need to look at that. It's got to be a mindset thing. We cannot just run away and cower and wait to be shot. We have to turn the tables. One shooter cannot fend off 20 people all at once.
Right.
He can maybe take out 1 or 2, but everybody's looking at self-preservation rather than trying to stop the threat. So this is something that we really need, as a society, we need to look at. If we're in the middle of one of these things, we need to get organized and kind of do the let's roll. Get in there and attack, and that will end the thing. A lot of these single shooter things are stopped by unarmed people.
60% of them. Yeah, 60% of them.
So
when they fight back, the caveat needs to be when they fight back. If they fight back, then they do, because most of these active shooters have not been to a red dot class with Dr. John Edeen. They've gone out and got a gun. Maybe they play Call of Duty or something. They're going to get their highest body count, or maybe they think they're the next Adam Lanza or James Holmes or whatever they are, whatever they're thinking. But they're not some pistolero that is going to have to be taken out by some tactical operator, are they? No.
In fact, anybody with a little bit of sense can figure out a way to safeguard themselves from an attack from behind and things like that. But these guys are focused. They become target focused, and they get tunnel vision just like everybody else who's in a shooting scenario. We all have a tendency to get tunnel vision. Well, these guys get tunnel vision. They won't see somebody coming from their flank or from behind, and so they can be blindsided essentially and stopped.
Right. Well, I mean, James Holmes, when James Holmes was in there, they were talking about, well, he had armor, he was masked, he was throwing gas. Have you ever had to shoot a weapon with a mask on?
Yeah, you have no peripheral vision at all.
Well, you have no peripheral vision. When you get hot, it starts to fog up.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm imagining he was having an adrenaline dump. Unbelievable. If somebody had been armed in the Aurora Theater, they could have gone down the other aisle and just walked up beside him and popped him in the head.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is, where did he go? He went to the only theater in the area that was a gun-free zone.
Yeah.
it makes my point. These guys plan this stuff out. They're meticulous. And so when they plan on doing the shooting, they don't want interference. They want to be the only person with a gun and be able to shoot until either they run out of ammo or until there's a police response. And it's all about time. Time is the factor. And this is why having armed people in the place during the time of the shooting is the best way to stop these things.
Do you like?
And we can talk about that study, that Purdue study, and I think that's a very important study where they looked at resource officers, concealed carry, and
armed teachers and resource officers,
resource officer, all those things, and they found that the concealed carrier is a force multiplier, and it reduces the number of casualties dramatically.
Yeah, and I mean, the FASTER program that Rob's been through, they've had one occasion where they had to actually deal with somebody, and one of the armed teachers did not draw down on him. He talked him down. So they obviously are training well, and they are capable. So that's good stuff and everything else. Before we run out of time, I just got to ask you, because my Glock 17, I've got my Glock 17 right here beside me on the desk right here. I got my agency gun. And it has an RMR on it. And I'm getting ready to start training with the red dot because, it's a lot easier for somebody my age and everything to pull that up versus, say, trying to get that good sight picture and the blur and all that other stuff. Are you finding it to be a short learning curve?
Yes. In fact, this was a 3 8-hour day class. In the beginning, the first day, we're all struggling to try to find our sights and put the red dot on the sights. By the end, you realize, guess what? It doesn't matter where the red dot is on that screen. As long as that red dot you can see it, because there's no parallax in those things. You put the red dot on the target, whether it's on the top left corner, bottom right corner, press the trigger, you get your hit. But it doesn't mitigate good trigger control, good fundamentals. You still have to have good trigger press, can't be jerking the trigger, because if you're doing that, it's going to go flying. But it's really, the strength is in making transitions from target to target to target, so multiple targets, and also distance shooting. Shooting a headshot at 25 yards, it's child's play. Headshot at 45 to 50 yards, doable. Okay, with iron sights, I think I would be challenged to do that. But with that red dot, we were hitting an 8-inch plate at 45 yards, and we were hitting multiple shots in a row. Bing, ping, bing, ping, bing, ping, and it's an eye-opening thing. And I think that people who are in their middle age, when they start getting the problems with the nearsight, or with the farsightedness, the presbyopia, difficulty with being able to focus on that front sight, you don't have to focus on your front sight. You focus on the target, put the red dot over the target, boom. And, a lot of it is practicing presentations and getting that red dot so that when you present the gun, you're looking at the red dot. It just comes up naturally. And the way you do that is first find your front sight and then find the red dot. But after,
the natural point of aim with the Glock.
Say again?
I was going to say the natural point of aim with the Glock is a little bit high because of the angle on the grip. So I'm finding that when I do press up, I'm having to bring the back end of it up. We're about to run out of time. And I just want to let everybody know that from time to time, Dr. John or Rob Morse or both of them will start shooting me these text messages and saying, hey, we're going to go train at this really fun thing. Why don't you come and play? And then they'll start sending me pictures of Dr. John's SIG 220. I'll let you shoot this, Bill, and all this other stuff. And, it's quite cruel, Dr. John. I'm just going to tell you.
Hey, bribery will get you everywhere. You know that, right?
There you go. Thank you for joining us this evening. I will talk to you soon.
My pleasure.